Sell your necklace, Ma. We're struggling with the mortgage. I froze, staring at my daughter, not believing the words had just come from her lips. My own Emily, my sweet, charming girl who I had raised with love and care, was looking at me with such a casual expression, as if asking me to part with something precious was perfectly normal. My hands trembled slightly as I set down the cup of tea I had been holding. I couldn't believe this was happening. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Life hadn't been easy since your father passed. I had worked hard to keep our home, to make sure Emily had a roof over her head, clothes on her back, and the chance to go to college. I had sacrificed countless evenings and weekends, working extra shifts just to make ends meet. And here I was, thinking that despite the struggles, we were holding it together. But hearing those words from Emily shook me to the core. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely making eye contact, as if this conversation didn't matter. Ma, we have to think about the bills, she said again, her voice calm. The mortgage is late. Maybe it's time to sell that old necklace. It's just sitting there, right? I felt a lump form in my throat. That necklace had been in our family for generations. My grandmother had worn it on her wedding day, and then it passed to my mother, and now to me. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it carried memories, love, and history. And now my own daughter was telling me to sell it as if it were just an object. I wanted to scream, to make her understand what she was asking, but I forced myself to stay quiet. I couldn't let anger take over just yet. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried to explain why the necklace meant so much. I told her about her grandmother and how proud she would have been to see it passed down, about how some things couldn't be measured in money. Emily listened, but her expression didn't soften. She tapped her fingers on the couch impatiently and said, I get it, Ma. I do. But what good is a necklace if we lose our house? I just want us to survive. Isn't that more important? I felt a sharp pang in my heart. My little girl, who used to cling to me for comfort, now sounded like a stranger, calculating and practical in a way that hurt more than words could describe. For a moment, I wondered if I had failed her as a mother, if all my efforts had somehow created this sense of entitlement and coldness. I didn't answer her immediately. I just sat there, letting the weight of her words sink in. I knew we were in trouble financially, yes, but was giving up something so precious really the only solution? And more importantly, why did it feel like she had crossed a line I wasn't ready to forgive? That moment marked the start of a turning point I never expected. It wasn't just about the necklace or the mortgage anymore. Something had shifted between us, and I had no idea how far this rift would go, or how it would change us both. After that day, life at home became tense and fragile. Emily started complaining more often, criticizing the little decisions I made. If dinner wasn't exactly what she wanted, or if I suggested saving money instead of buying something trendy, she would roll her eyes and sigh, making it clear she thought I was holding her back. She wanted new clothes, the latest gadgets, and weekend trips with friends I couldn't afford. Every request seemed bigger than the last, and I felt the walls closing in. I kept asking myself if I was doing enough, if my pride was blinding me from the reality we were living in. I wanted to protect Emily, to make sure she had everything she needed, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the danger of spending money we didn't have. Pride fought with survival every day, and it was exhausting. I knew I had to find a way to keep our home and keep my daughter safe, but I also had to protect myself from being taken advantage of. During one of these difficult days, I met James, our neighbor. He was kind, considerate, and always ready to help without expecting anything in return. We started talking over the fence, about small things at first, like the weather or our gardens. Slowly, our conversations grew deeper, and I realized I could trust him. His calm, supportive presence made me feel less alone, and I began to see that maybe I didn't have to carry all this weight by myself. While I tried to navigate this emotional minefield, Emily's behavior grew bolder. I didn't notice at first, but small signs started appearing, her asking questions about my online banking, casually looking at bills, checking my computer when I stepped away. I dismissed it, thinking she was curious or worried, but one evening, I discovered the truth. Emily had applied online to access my savings account. She didn't tell me, didn't ask for permission, she just did it. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected. I felt stunned and hurt, unable to comprehend that my own daughter could take such a step without even talking to me. It wasn't just money anymore, it was a violation of trust, of everything I had taught her about respect and honesty. I realized that the financial struggles we faced had triggered something darker in her, a sense of entitlement that was growing every day. I knew I couldn't let things spiral further. I had to protect what little stability we had while figuring out how to confront Emily. At the same time, James's quiet support gave me hope that I could handle this, that I didn't have to fight alone. The situation was tense, painful, and frightening, but I knew that I had to stay strong. The betrayal had opened a door, and I could feel the storm coming, but I also sensed that I was slowly finding the strength to face it head-on. The next week, I noticed bills weren't adding up. Some payments had cleared, but the amounts seemed off. Then, one evening, I logged into my account and froze. Large sums were missing, money I had been saving for emergencies, for the mortgage, for our future. My heart sank as I saw the withdrawals. Each transaction was linked to tuition payments, online shopping, and other luxuries Emily had no right to take. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with wide eyes and a mix of innocence and defiance. "Ma, I just needed it," she said softly. "I'm trying to get through college, and you're always so strict. Don't you want me to succeed?" Her voice trembled just enough to make me question myself. I wanted to scream, to demand she understand the betrayal, but her words hit me differently. They made me feel guilty, like I wasn't supporting my own daughter. I tried to explain how wrong it was, how it wasn't just about money but trust. I reminded her that everything I did was to keep us afloat, to protect her, to make sure we didn't lose our home. But Emily shook her head, tears in her eyes, and said, "You never trust me, Ma. You always act like I'm the problem. Maybe if you believed in me, I wouldn't have had to do this." Her words, her manipulation, twisted my stomach into knots. I had always wanted to support her, to give her everything I could, but now it felt like every effort I made was being used against me. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. This wasn't just a mistake she made, this was calculated, and it was painful to realize that the daughter I loved could turn on me so easily. It was during this dark moment that James stopped by. He had noticed Emily's behavior from the way she treated me, the small manipulations, and the entitlement. He didn't try to interfere at first, but when he saw the strain on my face, he gently said, "Claire, I've noticed how she's acting. You can't let this continue. You've been too generous, and she's taking advantage of your kindness." Hearing someone else say it out loud made the situation hit me fully. I wasn't imagining things. Emily was using me, manipulating me to get what she wanted. For the first time, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I had to protect myself and what little stability we had. That night, I sat in silence, thinking about the person my daughter was becoming and the person I needed to become in response. I couldn't allow this betrayal to destroy us. The emotional weight was heavy, but I felt a flicker of strength. Maybe it was the realization that I had allies, maybe it was anger, or maybe it was simply survival. Whatever it was, I knew things had changed, and I had to act carefully if I wanted to regain control. By the time Emily moved her boyfriend into our small apartment, I felt like I was drowning. Every day, I was stretched thinner, covering groceries, bills, and extra expenses for 2 adults instead of 1. I tried to remind myself to stay calm, to focus on keeping the household together, but inside, a storm was growing. I began questioning myself. Had I raised her wrong? Was I too strict or too soft? Did I push her into entitlement without realizing it? Her friends started coming over regularly, loud and careless, teasing me about my old-fashioned ways and my sacrifices. One evening, they laughed at the way I still cooked meals from scratch, calling it grandma style, while Emily nodded, pretending to agree. I felt my heart break a little more each time. These weren't just casual remarks, they were knives twisting, making me doubt every decision I had ever made for her. I realized that the daughter I loved so much had chosen to side with people who saw me as weak, someone to mock rather than respect. It was crushing, emotionally exhausting, and humiliating. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had worked my entire life to provide stability and love, only to be treated like a burden by my own family. Every day felt heavier than the last. Yet, in the quiet moments, away from the teasing and the laughter, I started to think differently. I realized that feeling sorry for myself wouldn't fix anything. I had to reclaim control, not through anger, not through shouting, but through planning, patience, and determination. I began quietly taking notes, mentally mapping out how to protect my finances, how to regain my independence, and how to make Emily understand the consequences of her actions without losing my dignity. I started small, restricting access to my accounts, tightening budgets, and thinking about opportunities one had ignored for years. I reminded myself that revenge didn't have to be loud or cruel, it could be calculated and empowering. The betrayal had pushed me to the edge, but it had also awakened something inside me. I could no longer be passive. I would not allow my love and sacrifices to be used against me. Instead, I would use my intelligence, patience, and resilience to turn this situation around. The idea of slowly taking back control, of showing Emily and her friends that their mockery wouldn't define me, gave me a strange sense of relief. That night, I sat alone in my dimly lit kitchen, sipping tea and letting the quiet wash over me. I felt the weight of betrayal and exhaustion pressing down, but also a growing spark of determination. Emily had taken so much for granted, but I realized she didn't understand how strong I could be. The breaking point had arrived, and it wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about reclaiming my life and showing her the consequences of her actions. I started taking small steps to reclaim control over my life. First, I secured my finances, changing passwords and limiting access to accounts Emily had been using without permission. I made sure she couldn't drain my savings again, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny sense of relief. It was a quiet move, unnoticed by her, but it gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. Next, I enrolled in a professional course I had always wanted to pursue but never had the time or courage for. It was online and flexible, perfect for my schedule. I told no one, not even James. Each lesson, each skill I learned, felt like a small victory. I could feel myself growing stronger, smarter, and more confident. It was empowering to know that I was building something for myself, something Emily couldn't touch or control. Meanwhile, Emily acted as if she was still in control. She continued making demands, asking for money, and flaunting her lifestyle as if nothing had changed. Her overconfidence became her weakness. She didn't notice the small changes I had made, the ways I was quietly reclaiming my independence. It was almost satisfying to watch her strut around, unaware that the balance of power was shifting slowly, almost invisibly. I also started subtly revealing Emily's manipulative behavior to people I trusted. I would mention small incidents to friends and neighbors, showing how she twisted situations and made me feel guilty for things I hadn't done. I didn't attack her or gossip unnecessarily, but I let others see the truth for themselves. Over time, people began noticing her entitlement and selfishness, while I remained calm and composed. Even James noticed the change. He commented once, with a small smile, "You're handling her very differently now. I can see the strength you didn't realize you had." That acknowledgement, though quiet, made me feel validated. I realized that my revenge didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It could be subtle, smart, and ultimately more effective. Each day, I felt more in control. The fear and anxiety that had haunted me were slowly being replaced by strategy and determination. I didn't need to yell or punish, I just needed to reclaim my life quietly, one decision at a time. And with each small step, I could see the cracks forming in Emily's confidence, though she didn't know it yet. By taking control of my finances, building my skills, and revealing the truth to those who mattered, I was setting the stage for a bigger change. The quiet revenge had begun, and with patience, I knew it would grow into something powerful. Emily might still think she was winning, but in reality, the game was already shifting, and I was the one leading it. The day finally came when Emily's reckless behavior started catching up with her. Her boyfriend, who had been covering for her irresponsibility, finally confronted her about the money she had taken and the lies she had told. She argued and tried to manipulate him, but he wasn't buying it anymore. At the same time, her school sent a warning about unpaid tuition and missing documents, things she had used my account to cover without properly managing. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, Emily realized her actions had real consequences. I had been waiting patiently for the right moment. I didn't rush or act out of anger. Instead, I watched, planning carefully how to reveal the truth about her deceit without losing my composure. One evening, during a small family gathering, I gently guided a conversation toward responsibility and trust. I shared, calmly and clearly, the events that had taken place, explaining how money had been used without permission and how lies had hurt those closest to her. I spoke with facts, not emotion, letting the story unfold naturally. Emily's face went pale. Her friends and relatives listened in shock, realizing for the first time the depth of her manipulations. The casual confidence she had carried for months vanished. People who had thought she was just charming and sweet now saw her for what she had truly done. She tried to interrupt, to explain herself, but I stayed calm, not giving her the satisfaction of an argument. My restraint made the moment even more powerful. Her humiliation was quiet but profound. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not just from embarrassment, but from the realization that she had underestimated me. She had believed she could control the situation, manipulate me, and avoid any consequences. Instead, she faced the truth in front of people whose opinions mattered to her. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness that my daughter had reached this point, relief that honesty had finally surfaced, and a quiet satisfaction that my plan had worked without cruelty. I didn't yell, I didn't punish her, and I didn't make a scene. I simply let the truth stand on its own. Watching Emily struggle to understand what had happened, I realized she was beginning to see my strength, not just as her mother, but as a person who could endure betrayal, stand firm, and reclaim control without losing dignity. That realization, more than anything, was my quiet revenge. By remaining calm, composed, and intelligent, I showed that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it works silently, letting the consequences reveal themselves naturally. Emily had learned a painful lesson, and I had proven to myself that patience, strategy, and self-respect could be far more powerful than anger or revenge. The balance had shifted, and I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. After months of careful planning and rebuilding, I finally bought a small home of my own. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, paid for with my savings and the extra income one had earned from my new skills. Walking through the empty rooms for the first time, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. This house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was a symbol of independence, of control over my life, and of the strength I had rediscovered. Emily, on the other hand, was struggling. Without access to my support and with the consequences of her reckless spending catching up to her, she faced bills she couldn't pay and tuition deadlines she had ignored. I didn't gloat or interfere, but it was clear she could no longer rely on me to fix her mistakes. The tables had turned, and for the first time, she had to face responsibility on her own. Watching her stumble wasn't satisfying in a cruel way, it was just the reality of choices catching up. Meanwhile, I started forming new friendships. I joined a small local group of women taking evening classes and volunteering in the community. Their support and encouragement helped me heal emotionally, and I realized how lonely I had been while focusing so much on Emily. These new connections reminded me that life could be fulfilling beyond the challenges I had faced, and they celebrated my achievements without judgment or expectation. James, who had quietly supported me from the beginning, became even more involved in my life. He offered advice when I needed it, helped with practical matters, and encouraged me to keep pursuing opportunities one had once thought impossible. I didn't rely on him for everything, but having someone I trusted made the journey easier and more confident. His presence reminded me that life could be kind and supportive, even after betrayal. In this new phase, I felt empowered. I no longer lived in fear of Emily's demands or manipulations. I could make decisions freely, invest in my future, and enjoy the life I had worked so hard to secure. The small house, my growing skills, and my supportive circle became symbols of my transformation. Emily's struggles were a silent reminder of how far we had both come. I didn't need to punish her, her situation reflected the choices she had made. Meanwhile, I was thriving, building a life that reflected my strength and independence. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud, not just of surviving, but of taking control, turning my hardships into opportunity, and proving to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. The betrayal and pain had shaped me, but they hadn't defined me. I had reclaimed my life, and that sense of empowerment was worth more than anything I had lost along the way. A few weeks later, Emily came to my door unannounced. She looked different somehow, her confident, overbearing air was replaced with hesitation. "Ma, can we talk?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. I invited her in but didn't show any warmth. I knew what she wanted, to manipulate me again, to regain control she had lost. She started softly, trying to appeal to my emotions, reminding me of old memories, claiming she had changed, and hinting that she needed my help. For a moment, I listened, letting her speak, but inside I was preparing myself. I wouldn't fall for empty words this time. When she paused, I began calmly recounting everything, the lies, the theft, the manipulation, the way she had taken advantage of my kindness for so long. I spoke clearly, without yelling, but each word carried the weight of months of betrayal. I reminded her how she had drained our household, humiliated me in front of friends, and made me doubt my own judgment. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't shout either. I let the facts speak for themselves. Emily tried to interrupt, tried to twist the story, but I held my ground. I explained that trust had to be rebuilt slowly and that forgiveness wasn't automatic. "You can't expect me to forgive everything right now," I said, looking her in the eyes. "You've made choices, and those choices have consequences. You need to understand that before anything changes between us." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not anger, not defiance, but real fear. She realized that her actions had lasting effects, that I wasn't someone she could push around anymore, and that my calm strength was more powerful than any outburst she could provoke. The weight of her selfishness and entitlement finally hit her. I set clear boundaries: no more access to my finances, no more taking advantage of my home, and no more excuses for reckless behavior. I told her that respect and honesty were non-negotiable, and that until she could prove she had changed, our relationship would be distant. It wasn't revenge in the loud, dramatic sense, it was protection, it was reclaiming control, it was letting her face the reality of her actions. Emily left quietly, her head low, and I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a quiet pride. The confrontation had been necessary, not to punish, but to show her that manipulation and selfishness could not override integrity and strength. That moment marked a turning point. I had stood firm, calmly and intelligently, and Emily had finally begun to understand the consequences of her choices. It was cathartic, a release of months of tension, and it showed me that standing strong and setting boundaries could be more powerful than anger or revenge. I had regained my voice, my control, and my dignity, and Emily was learning the lesson she had long avoided. Months passed, and I began to see the results of my hard work and careful planning. My career was growing steadily. I had built new skills through the professional course I had taken, and opportunities one had never imagined were opening up. Financially, I was stable for the first time in years. I could pay my bills on time, save for the future, and even enjoy small comforts without fear or guilt. The independence I had fought so hard to achieve was no longer a dream, it was my reality. Emily, on her part, started to change. Slowly, she began acknowledging the mistakes she had made and the ways she had hurt me. She apologized sincerely, though I remained cautious. Trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and I wasn't ready to hand over control again. I allowed her efforts to show that she was willing to take responsibility, but I kept boundaries firmly in place. It was important for her to understand that actions carried consequences, and that rebuilding our relationship would require patience, honesty, and respect. I also began sharing my story with close friends and neighbors, not as gossip but as a way to reflect on my journey and the lessons I had learned. People listened with empathy and admiration, offering words of support and encouragement. Their responses reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my struggles and triumphs could inspire others, and that speaking my truth could bring a sense of closure and healing. Reflecting on everything, I realized that what I had done wasn't about punishing Emily. It wasn't about cruelty or revenge in the typical sense. My revenge had been reclaiming my life, protecting myself, and setting boundaries. It had been about showing strength and resilience, and about proving that betrayal and manipulation didn't have to define my future. I had faced heartbreak, disappointment, and humiliation, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. I could see how far we had both come. Emily was learning lessons she had avoided, and I was finally living the life I deserved. The house, the career, the friendships, and the independence, all of it was proof that perseverance, strategy, and patience could turn pain into empowerment. I no longer felt trapped by the past, and I no longer feared being taken advantage of. In the quiet moments, I would sit in my home and feel a deep sense of peace. The chaos and betrayal of the past no longer controlled me. I had taken back what was mine, my dignity, my security, and my life. And in doing so, I had discovered something even more valuable, my own strength, resilience, and capacity to overcome challenges. The journey had been painful, but the victory was real, satisfying, and entirely mine. Looking back on everything, I realize how much I've been through, and how far I've come. I didn't throw Emily out or yell at her. I didn't make a scene or act in anger. I simply took back my power, my home, and my dignity. That alone was enough. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and disappointment, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Sitting in my small, comfortable home, I feel a peace I haven't known in years. The house, the work I've done to build my career, the friendships I've made, and the independence I've earned are all reminders that I'm in control of my own life. Emily is learning her lessons, facing the consequences of her choices, and trying to change, but my focus is on myself now. I've realized that reclaiming my life doesn't require revenge in the cruel sense, it simply requires strength, patience, and self-respect. I think about those moments when I felt helpless, when her words cut deeper than I ever imagined, and when I doubted my own judgment. Each of those experiences shaped me, but they didn't define me. Instead, they taught me what it truly means to stand firm, to protect yourself, and to rise above betrayal. I feel proud of how I handled everything, not with anger or resentment, but with calm, intelligence, and determination. Sometimes I wonder what other people would have done in my situation. Would they have shouted, cut ties immediately, or let the betrayal go unnoticed? Would they have fought back, or quietly reclaimed their lives like I did? I want you, the viewer, to think about it. What would you have done if someone you loved so deeply betrayed you? How would you have responded? If this story resonates with you, I encourage you to share your experiences. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted or loved? How did it feel, and how did you respond? Comment below, I want to hear your story. Sharing these moments can be healing, and sometimes hearing others' journeys can give us courage for our own struggles. As I sit here now, watching the sunlight spill across my living room, I feel a quiet triumph. Life has tested me, but I have endured and grown. I am no longer defined by the betrayal I faced, instead, I am defined by the choices I made to protect myself, to rebuild, and to rise stronger. A smile forms on my lips, not a forced one, but a true, peaceful smile. I've taken back control, and I am free. My life is my own, my dignity intact, and my strength undeniable. And as I look forward, I feel confident that whatever challenges come next, I will face them with the same calm determination. My journey isn't just about survival, it's about thriving, and knowing that I am finally living life on my own terms.